Sarah Miller, a 28-year-old mother whose life had been dismantled by a series of unfortunate events. The wind was a constant reminder of her failure. She sat on a wooden bench in Millennium Park, her arms wrapped tightly around her 5-year-old daughter, Lily. Sarah's world had collapsed 6 months ago when her husband passed away from a sudden illness, leaving behind a mountain of medical debt and no life insurance. The eviction notice had been the final blow. Now, they were invisible, part of the growing number of people who walked the streets during the day and prayed for a spot in the overcrowded shelters at night. "Mommy, my toes feel like ice cubes," Lily whispered, her voice muffled by a thin, faded scarf. Sarah squeezed her tighter, blinking back tears that threatened to freeze on her eyelashes. "I know, baby. Just a little longer. We'll go to the library soon. It's warm there." As Sarah stood up to begin their walk, her boot brushed against something leather and solid. She looked down. Half buried in a mound of fresh snow was a dark brown alligator skin wallet. It looked heavy, expensive, and completely out of place in the slush. Sarah picked it up, her hands trembling. She shouldn't open it, but she had to know. Inside, there was a thick stack of $100 bills, at least $3,000, and several gold credit cards. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This money could buy a motel room for a month. It could buy Lily a real winter coat and a warm meal. It was a miracle. Or was it a test? Sarah looked at the ID card. A handsome man with stern, piercing blue eyes stared back. Ethan Vance. She recognized the name from the business journals she used to read at her old job. He was the CFO of Vance Enterprises, one of the city's largest investment firms. She looked at the money, then at Lily's pale, shivering face. The internal battle lasted only a second. Sarah was many things, homeless, grieving, and exhausted, but she was not a thief. "Come on, Lily," Sarah said, her voice regaining a spark of purpose. "We have to find this man." The headquarters of Vance Enterprises was a monolith of glass and steel that pierced the gray Chicago skyline. Sarah and Lily stood in the lobby, looking like ghosts in a palace. The heated air felt like a physical embrace, but the stares from the well-dressed employees felt like ice. The receptionist, a woman with perfectly manicured nails and a sharp gaze, looked Sarah up and down. Sarah's coat was frayed, and Lily's boots were held together by duct tape. "May I help you?" the receptionist asked, her tone suggesting she was seconds away from calling security. "I found something belonging to Mr. Ethan Vance," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'd like to return it to him personally." The receptionist scoffed. "Mr. Vance is in a high-level meeting. You can leave it here with me." "I'm sorry, but I'd prefer to give it to him or his office directly," Sarah insisted. She didn't trust that the wallet, with its thousands of dollars, would make it to the top floor if she simply left it on a desk. "Listen, honey." The receptionist leaned in. "We get lost items from people like you every day trying to get a handout. Leave, or I call security." Suddenly, an elderly woman stepped out of the elevator. She was dressed in an elegant wool coat with a string of pearls around her neck. Her eyes were kind, but carried the weight of someone who saw everything. This was Mrs. Evelyn Vance, Ethan's mother and the matriarch of the family. "Is there a problem here, Sandra?" Evelyn asked. "No, Mrs. Vance. This woman was just leaving," the receptionist said quickly. Evelyn ignored her and looked at Sarah. She saw the exhaustion in Sarah's eyes, the protective way she held her daughter's hand, and the undeniable honesty in her posture. "You have something for my son?" Evelyn asked softly. Sarah reached into her pocket and held out the wallet. "I found this in the park. Everything is inside. I just wanted to make sure it got back to him." Evelyn took the wallet, her eyes widening as she felt the weight of the cash still inside. She looked at Sarah's shivering daughter. "You found this in the park, and you came all the way here to give it back. Do you have any idea how much money is in here?" "I do," Sarah said simply, "but it isn't mine." Evelyn Vance had spent her life surrounded by people who wanted something from her family. She was an expert at sniffing out greed, but looking at Sarah, she saw only a desperate, quiet dignity. "What is your name, dear?" Evelyn asked. "Sarah Miller. And this is Lily." Well, Sarah, my son is a very busy man, and quite frankly, he can be a bit cynical. If you give this to him, he might just offer you a standard reward and forget your face by tomorrow. But I don't forget faces. Evelyn checked her watch. It's nearly dinner time. My driver is outside. You and your daughter look like you could use a hot meal. Please, join me at the Vance estate. My son will be there shortly, and you can return it to him yourself. Sarah hesitated. The idea of entering a mansion in her current state was terrifying. But the mention of a hot meal made Lily's stomach growl audibly. The sound echoed in the marble lobby. We wouldn't want to intrude, Sarah whispered. Nonsense, Evelyn smiled, a plan already forming in her mind. She had been trying to find a wife for Ethan for years, someone who wasn't a social climber or a corporate shark. In this cold, gray city, she had just found a woman who returned $3,000, while her own child's shoes were falling apart. I insist. The ride in the black Bentley was silent. Lily stared out the window at the Christmas lights, her eyes wide with wonder. Sarah sat stiffly, feeling the dirt of the street on the plush leather seats. Evelyn watched them both, noticing how Sarah prioritized Lily's comfort, adjusting the child's scarf even when she herself was shaking from the sudden warmth of the car. They arrived at a gated estate in the Gold Coast. The house was a masterpiece of colonial architecture, glowing with thousands of white fairy lights. As they entered the foyer, a tall, imposing man was descending the stairs, barking orders into a cell phone. Ethan Vance was exactly as he appeared in his photos, sharp, handsome, and radiating an aura of cold efficiency. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw his mother entering with two drifters. Mother? What is this? Ethan asked, hanging up the phone. His eyes landed on Sarah, and his brow furrowed in confusion. Ethan stepped into the light of the chandelier. He was dressed in a bespoke suit that probably cost more than Sarah had earned in a year. His gaze was clinical, assessing Sarah like a bad investment. Ethan, don't use that tone, Evelyn said firmly. This young lady found your wallet in Millennium Park. She came all the way to the office to return it. Ethan reached into his pocket and realized for the first time it was missing. He looked at the wallet in his mother's hand. He walked over, took it, and flipped it open. He saw the cash. He saw the cards. His expression didn't soften. It became more skeptical. And what do you want in return? Ethan asked, his voice low and guarded. A job? A settlement? People don't bring back this much cash for free. Sarah felt a flash of anger, the first heat she'd felt all day that didn't come from a heater. She stood taller. I don't want anything from you, Mr. Vance. I brought it back because I'm raising my daughter to be an honest person. We'll be going now. She turned to Lily, but Evelyn stepped forward, blocking the door. She's staying for dinner, Ethan, Evelyn commanded. It wasn't a suggestion. Mother, she's a stranger, Ethan hissed, pulling his mother aside. We don't know who she is or where she's been. She could be part of a scam. She's a mother who is cold and hungry, Evelyn whispered back. And she is more of a lady than the models you date. If you can't be a gentleman for 1 hour, then I have failed as a parent. Now go tell the chef we have 2 more guests. Ethan looked back at Sarah. She was standing by the door, refusing to sit on the furniture, looking at him not with awe, but with a quiet, burning disdain. It was a look he wasn't used to. Usually women did everything to please him. This woman looked like she wanted to slap him. Fine, Ethan muttered. 1 dinner. He didn't know it yet, but this dinner was the start of a transformation that would dismantle the walls he had built around his heart. The dining room was a cavernous hall of polished mahogany and silver. Sarah felt like an intruder as she helped Lily onto a high-backed velvet chair. The table was set with more silverware than Sarah knew how to use. Ethan sat at the head, his presence a heavy weight of silent judgment, while Evelyn sat opposite him, beaming with an inscrutable grace. A maid served a hot cream of mushroom soup. Lily stared at it, her eyes wide. She looked at her mother, waiting for permission. Sarah nodded softly, and the young girl began to eat with a focused intensity that broke Evelyn's heart. So, Sarah, Ethan said, breaking the silence. His voice was like flint. Tell me your story. Where do you work? Where is your home? Sarah paused, her spoon halfway to her mouth. She didn't want his pity, but she wouldn't lie. I used to work in administrative logistics for a freight company. My husband died 6 months ago. Since then, things haven't been easy. We lost our apartment last month. We've been staying wherever we can. Ethan's eyes flickered. The streets? In this weather? Some nights it's the shelter. Some nights it's the 24-hour laundromat. We do what we have to, Sarah replied, her voice steady. Ethan looked at Lily, who was now happily eating a piece of sourdough bread. The child was clean, despite her tattered clothes. It was clear Sarah sacrificed everything to keep her daughter presentable and safe. For the first time, Ethan's skepticism began to crack. He saw not a drifter, but a warrior. As the main course was served, a roasted herb chicken, Evelyn decided it was time to push her plan forward. She had seen how Ethan watched Sarah. He wasn't looking at her with his usual cold calculation. He was looking at her with a growing, uncomfortable fascination. Sarah, Evelyn began, I have a large guest wing that is completely empty. The weather forecast says a blizzard is hitting Chicago tonight. I won't have it on my conscience that a woman who saved my son's reputation and property is out in the snow. Ethan choked slightly on his wine. Mother… Ethan, be quiet, Evelyn said with a sharp smile. Sarah, I want you and Lily to stay here, not just for tonight, but through the Christmas week. In exchange, perhaps you can help me with the holiday preparations? My joints aren't what they used to be, and I need someone with an organized mind to help me manage the house. Sarah felt a lump in her throat. Mrs. Vance, I can't. I don't want to be a burden. You aren't a burden. You are an answer to a prayer, Evelyn said, looking pointedly at her son. Ethan looked at Sarah. For a moment, their eyes locked. He saw her pride, a fierce, beautiful thing, and he saw her fear for her daughter. The blizzard is real, Sarah, Ethan said, his voice surprisingly soft. The city is shutting down the transit lines in an hour. You shouldn't be outside. Sarah looked at Lily, whose head was starting to droop from the warmth and the full belly. She looked back at Evelyn. Thank you. Just until the storm passes. Evelyn led them to a suite on the second floor. It was larger than Sarah's entire former apartment. The beds were covered in Egyptian cotton, and the air smelled of lavender and expensive wax. There are clothes in the wardrobe from my niece, Evelyn lied smoothly. She had actually kept a stock of high-quality clothing for just such an occasion. And a bath. Use whatever you need. Once Evelyn left, Sarah locked the door. She sat on the edge of the bed and wept. She wept for the husband she missed, for the cold she had endured, and for the surreal kindness of a stranger. Lily crawled into her lap. Is this a castle, Mommy? Just for a little while, baby. Just for a little while. Across the hall, Ethan was in his study, but he wasn't working. He was staring at the wallet on his desk. He reached inside and pulled out a small, laminated photo he'd kept in a hidden pocket. It was a photo of himself as a boy with his father. He realized that if he had lost this wallet, that photo, the only one he had left, would have been gone forever. He felt a pang of guilt for how he had treated Sarah. He realized he didn't even know her last name until 20 minutes ago. Yet she had protected his memories without even knowing it. The next morning, Chicago was buried under 2 feet of snow. The world was white and silent. Sarah woke up early, her habits of survival making it impossible to sleep in. She dressed in a simple navy blue sweater and trousers she found in the wardrobe, then went downstairs to find the kitchen. She found Ethan there, standing by the coffee machine. He wasn't in a suit. He wore a gray cashmere sweater and jeans. He looked younger, less like a titan of industry, and more like a man. Coffee? He offered. Thank you, Sarah said, taking the mug. I wanted to apologize, Ethan said, not looking at her. For last night. I've spent too much time in boardrooms. I've forgotten that some people do the right thing just because it's right. Sarah took a sip, the warmth spreading through her. In my world, Mr. Vance, honesty is all you have left when you lose everything else. If I took your money, I would have lost myself too. Ethan turned to her, leaning against the counter. My mother told me you have a background in logistics. I looked into the company you mentioned. They went under after a hostile takeover, didn't they? They did. I was the last one in the office before they padlocked the doors. I need someone at the firm, Ethan said, his professional mask returning, though his eyes were kinder. Someone who doesn't fold under pressure. After the holidays, I want you to come in for an interview. Not as a favor, but as a business opportunity. Evelyn watched from the doorway, out of sight. She saw the way Ethan's posture relaxed around Sarah. She saw how Sarah didn't flinch under his gaze. Most women were intimidated by Ethan's wealth or his intensity. Sarah was intimidated by neither. Over the next few days, the house transformed. Sarah didn't just help with holiday preparations, she took charge. She organized the catering, fixed the seating charts for the Christmas Eve gala, and even helped the decorators. She moved with an efficiency that impressed even the head butler. But it was Lily who truly changed the house. Her laughter echoed through the sterile halls. She convinced Ethan to help her build a gingerbread house. To everyone's shock, the CFO of Vance Enterprises spent 2 hours on the floor, covered in icing, trying to keep a candy roof from sliding off. She's good for him, Evelyn whispered to herself. However, the peace was shattered on the third day. A visitor arrived, Vanessa, Ethan's ex-girlfriend and the daughter of a major business rival. She arrived unannounced, dripping in fur and arrogance. Vanessa walked into the living room and stopped dead, staring at Sarah, who was currently hanging a garland with Lily. "Ethan, darling," Vanessa drawled, "I didn't know you were running a charity ward now. Who are these people?" Ethan walked in, his face immediately hardening. "They are my guests, Vanessa. What are you doing here?" "I came to invite you to my father's party, but I see you're busy." She looked at Sarah with a sneer. "Is this the help?" She's wearing a very nice sweater for a maid. Sarah felt the old sting of shame, but before she could speak, Lily stepped forward. "My mommy isn't a maid. She's a hero. She found the wallet." Vanessa laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "Oh, I see, a finder. Tell me, how much did you have to pay her to get it back, Ethan? These types always have a price." "That's enough," Ethan said, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. "Sarah has more integrity in her pinky finger than your entire social circle. You weren't invited here. Please leave." Vanessa's face twisted in rage. "You're choosing a beggar over me? My father will hear about this, Ethan. The merger is off." "Good," Ethan said. "I never liked the terms anyway." As Vanessa stormed out, Sarah looked at Ethan, worried. "I didn't mean to cause trouble for your business." Ethan turned to her, and for the first time, he smiled. A real, genuine smile. "Sarah, you didn't cause trouble. You just gave me the excuse I needed to get rid of a headache. Now, I believe we have a gingerbread house to finish." The evening after Vanessa's departure was quiet, but the air in the mansion had shifted. The tension wasn't between Sarah and Ethan anymore. It was the tension of two people realizing they were no longer strangers. After Lily fell asleep in the sprawling guest bed, Sarah wandered down to the library, looking for a book to settle her restless mind. She found Ethan sitting by the fireplace, a glass of scotch in his hand, staring at the embers. He didn't look like a CFO. He looked like a man carrying the weight of a mountain. "I'm sorry about Vanessa," Ethan said without turning around. "She represents a world I've been trying to escape, even though I live in the center of it." Sarah sat in the armchair opposite him. "People like her see the world as a series of transactions. They don't understand things that don't have a price tag." Ethan looked at her. "And you? What do you see?" "I see a man who is lonely in a house full of expensive things," Sarah said softly. Ethan was silent for a long time. Then, he told her about his father, how the man had worked himself to death to build the Vance empire, leaving Ethan with a fortune but no memories of a father's hug. He spoke of the pressure to be perfect and the fear of being used. Sarah, in turn, spoke of her husband, Mark, how they had nothing but use to dance in their tiny kitchen to the radio. For the first time in years, Ethan felt seen, not for his bank account, but for his soul. The next morning, Evelyn announced that the annual Vance Christmas Gala, a massive black tie event, would proceed as planned. But there was a twist. "Sarah," Evelyn said over breakfast, "I've arranged for a stylist to come to the house. You will be attending the gala as my guest of honor." Sarah nearly dropped her fork. Mrs. Vance, I can't. I don't belong at a gala. I'm just a mother who found a wallet. You are a woman of character, Evelyn insisted. And tonight, I want the world to see what true grace looks like. The afternoon was a whirlwind. Sarah was pampered, her skin hydrated, her hair styled into a sophisticated updo that highlighted her elegant neck. Then she saw the dress. It was a deep emerald silk gown, modest yet breathtaking, that matched the color of her eyes. When she stepped out of the room, Lily was already dressed in a matching velvet dress, spinning in circles. "Mommy, you look like a queen." Sarah looked in the mirror. She didn't recognize the woman staring back. The shadows under her eyes had faded, replaced by a glow of hope. She wasn't just surviving anymore. For the first time in months, she felt alive. The grand ballroom of the Vance estate was filled with the elite of Chicago. Diamonds glittered under the chandeliers, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and champagne. Ethan stood near the entrance, greeting guests with his usual practiced mask. Then, the room went silent. Sarah descended the grand staircase. She didn't walk with the practiced arrogance of the socialites. She walked with the quiet confidence of someone who had survived the storm. Ethan stopped talking mid-sentence. His heart, usually so disciplined, skipped a beat. He walked to the base of the stairs and offered his hand. "Sarah," he whispered, loud enough only for her to hear. "You look incredible." "I feel like I'm in a dream," she replied, her hand trembling slightly in his. "Then don't wake up," he said, led her into the room. All night, rumors swirled. Who was she? An aristocrat from Europe? A new business partner? Vanessa was there too, watching from the corner, her face pale with envy. She tried to start a rumor that Sarah was a con artist, but Evelyn was always one step ahead, introducing Sarah as a dear family friend and a woman of extraordinary integrity. Just as Sarah began to feel at ease, a face from her past appeared in the crowd. It was Mr. Henderson, the landlord who had heartlessly evicted her and Lily. He was a minor investor, clinging to the edges of the Vance social circle. He recognized her immediately. Seeing Sarah in an emerald gown, leaning on the arm of Ethan Vance, made his blood run cold. Not out of guilt, but out of fear that she would ruin his reputation. He waited until Ethan was pulled away by a group of board members before approaching Sarah near the balcony. "So the little beggar found a new mark," Henderson hissed, grabbing her arm. "How did you do it? Did you steal that dress too? I should tell everyone here that I kicked you out for being a deadbeat." Sarah's face went pale. The old trauma of that cold night in the rain came rushing back. "Let go of me, Mr. Henderson." "Or what? You'll call the cops? They'll believe me over a homeless girl any day." "I believe the lady asked you to let go." Ethan's voice was like ice, vibrating with a suppressed rage. He had seen the interaction from across the room. Henderson jumped, releasing Sarah's arm. "Mr. Vance, I was telling this woman she shouldn't be here. She's a vagrant. I had to evict her myself." Ethan stepped between Henderson and Sarah, his tall frame casting a shadow over the smaller man. "I know exactly who she is, Henderson, and I know exactly who you are. I've reviewed the records of your property management company. You violate city codes and prey on the vulnerable." Ethan leaned in closer, his voice a low, terrifying growl. "By tomorrow morning, Vance Enterprises will have divested from every project you are involved in, and I will personally fund the legal team that represents the tenants you've wronged. Now, get out of my house before I have security throw you into the snow." Henderson fled, nearly tripping over his own feet. Sarah was shaking. Ethan turned to her, his expression softening instantly. He reached out and gently took her hands. "Are you okay?" "You didn't have to do that," Sarah whispered, tears blurring her vision. "He was right. I was a vagrant." "No," Ethan said firmly, lifting her chin so she had to look him in the eye. "You were a woman in a hard place. He is a man with a small soul. There is a very big difference. To me, Sarah, you are the most important person in this room." In the distance, the clock began to strike midnight. It was officially Christmas Day. Christmas morning arrived not with the biting cold of the previous week, but with a soft, golden sun reflecting off the fresh snow. Inside the Vance mansion, the atmosphere had shifted from a cold museum to a home. Sarah woke up to find a pile of gifts at the foot of the bed. Not just for Lily, but for her as well. Downstairs, the living room was a scene of uncharacteristic chaos. Ethan, the man who usually spent his mornings analyzing market trends, was on his knees helping Lily assemble a complex toy set. Evelyn sat nearby, sipping tea with a satisfied glint in her eyes. "Merry Christmas, Sarah," Ethan said, standing up. He looked relaxed, his usual armor completely gone. "You've done too much, Ethan," Sarah said, overwhelmed. "I'm just getting started," he replied. He handed her a small, heavy envelope. Sarah opened it to find a set of keys and a signed document. It wasn't a gift of money. It was a lease for a beautiful apartment near the park, with the first year already paid in full, and an official job offer as the head of operations for the Vance Foundation. "It's not a handout," Ethan said quickly, seeing her mouth open to protest. "It's an investment. I need someone I can trust to run my charitable works, and you need a base to build the life you and Lily deserve." The following days were a blur of transition. Sarah moved into the apartment, a sun-drenched space that felt like a sanctuary. For the first time in years, she didn't wake up wondering where her next meal would come from. She threw herself into her new role at the Vance Foundation, using her lived experience to overhaul how the city's shelters were funded. However, as the professional distance between her and Ethan grew, the emotional pull intensified. They saw each other for business lunches that lasted 3 hours. They spoke every night on the phone. Evelyn, ever the strategist, invited Sarah to tea. "You know, Sarah, Ethan has changed. He used to be a machine. Now he's a man. He's waiting for a sign from you. He's afraid that if he asks for more, you'll think you owe it to him because of the help he gave." Sarah realized Evelyn was right. Their dynamic was complicated by the debt of gratitude. Sarah needed to show him that she didn't love him for the keys or the job. She loved him for the man who sat on the floor and built gingerbread houses. New Year's Eve approached. Ethan invited Sarah to a quiet dinner at the very restaurant where he usually conducted his most ruthless business deals. But tonight, he had cleared the entire balcony. The city lights of Chicago sparkled below them. Ethan was uncharacteristically nervous. He kept fidgeting with his cufflinks. "Sarah," he began, "when you brought that wallet back, I thought you were a fluke. A statistical anomaly in a selfish world. But watching you these past weeks, you didn't just return my money. You returned my perspective. You reminded me that people are more than their net worth." Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. "Ethan, you gave me a life back. But even if we were still on that park bench and you were just a man with a lost wallet, I would still want to be sitting here with you." The tension broke. Ethan laughed, a deep, relieved sound. "I was so worried you'd say this was all too fast." Ethan stood up and walked around the table. He didn't pull out a ring immediately. Instead, he pulled out that old brown alligator skin wallet. "This wallet started everything," Ethan said. "It was lost, and it was found by the only person in this city who could have saved the man owning it." He opened the wallet. Tucked inside the cash slot was a stunning diamond ring, simple, elegant, and timeless. He dropped to one knee. "Sarah Miller, you are the bravest, most honest woman I have ever known. I don't want to just be your benefactor or your boss. I want to be your partner. I want to be the father Lily deserves and the husband who makes sure you never feel the cold again. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Sarah's face. Tears of joy, not of grief. "Yes, Ethan. 1,000 times yes." As they embraced, the first fireworks of the new year exploded over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in colors of hope and renewal. 1 year later. The Chicago wind was still biting, but Sarah was dressed in a thick wool coat. She and Ethan walked through Millennium Park, holding hands. Lily ran ahead of them, her new boots crunching loudly in the snow. They stopped at the very bench where Sarah had sat in despair just 12 months ago. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked, pulling her close. "I'm thinking about how one small choice can change 1,000 lives," Sarah replied. They weren't just there to reminisce. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out several envelopes. Throughout the park, she and Ethan began a new tradition. They looked for people who were sitting where Sarah had once sat. The tired mothers, the lonely elderly, the invisible ones. In each envelope was a gift card for warm clothes, a list of resources at the Vance Foundation, and a note that read, "Honesty and hope are never lost. Keep going." As the sun set on Christmas Day, Sarah looked at her husband and her daughter. She had returned a lost wallet, and in exchange, she had found a home, a purpose, and a love that was more valuable than all the gold in the world. The homeless mom was now the heart of a dynasty, proving that in a world of cold glass towers, a warm heart is the greatest power of all. The glass doors of the Vance Foundation felt heavier than they looked. Sarah wore a charcoal suit provided by Evelyn, a loan that Sarah knew she would never be asked to return. As the new head of operations, Sarah didn't just have a desk, she had a mission. But the transition from a park bench to a corner office wasn't seamless. She felt the imposter syndrome like a physical weight. Every time someone called her Ms. Miller, she looked behind her, expecting to see a real professional. Her first task was daunting, auditing the city's largest family shelter, a place she had slept in just weeks prior. Walking back into that building, not as a resident but as a benefactor, was a surreal experience. The smell, bleach mixed with damp coats, hit her like a wave. She saw women who looked exactly like she had, eyes hollow with the exhaustion of trying to keep their dignity while standing in a bread line. "I know that look," she whispered to herself. She didn't stay in the administrative office. She went to the floor. She sat with a young mother named Maria, who was clutching a toddler. "The system is broken," Maria said, unaware of who Sarah was. "They give us a bed for the night, but they don't give us a way out." Sarah took out her notebook. She wasn't just there to sign checks, she was there to build a bridge. That evening, she worked until the cleaning crew arrived, drafting the Vance Bridge program, a plan to provide guaranteed housing alongside job training. She realized that her homelessness wasn't a shameful past, it was her greatest professional asset. It gave her the eyes to see what the billionaires had missed. Despite the success at work, the social circles of Chicago weren't as welcoming as Evelyn. A local tabloid, tipped off by a bitter Vanessa, ran a blind item about a Cinderella story with a dark secret. They hinted that Sarah had targeted Ethan in the park, suggesting the lost wallet was a setup by a professional grifter. Ethan was furious. He wanted to sue the publication into oblivion. "Ethan, wait," Sarah said, stopping him in his office. "If you fight this with lawyers and anger, you make it look like we have something to hide. People like Vanessa expect me to crumble. They expect me to be ashamed of being poor." "I won't let them drag your name through the mud, Sarah," Ethan growled, his knuckles white as he gripped his mahogany desk. "My name was already in the mud when I was sleeping in a laundromat," she replied calmly. "I'm not afraid of the truth. I was homeless. I was desperate. But I was never a thief. Let them talk. I'll let my work at the foundation speak for me." That night, for the first time, Ethan didn't see Sarah as someone to be protected. He saw her as his equal, perhaps even his superior in strength. He realized that while he had spent his life protecting his wealth, she had spent hers protecting her soul. Lily's transition was perhaps the most heart-wrenching. The little girl, who had spent months being told to be quiet and stay close so they wouldn't be noticed by security guards, now had a bedroom larger than their old apartment. But Lily didn't want the expensive dolls Ethan bought. She would hide pieces of bread under her pillow, a habit from the days when she didn't know when the next meal was coming. Sarah found a stash of rolls and crackers during a routine cleaning. She sat on the floor with Lily and pulled her into her lap. "Baby, we have plenty of food now. You don't have to hide it anymore." "But what if the man at the gate says we have to leave?" Lily asked, her voice small. "What if the wallet man gets mad?" Ethan happened to be passing by the door and heard the exchange. He froze. He had assumed that giving them a house meant they were fixed. He didn't realize that trauma has a long shadow. He walked into the room, sat on the floor next to them, careless of his $1,000 trousers, and looked Lily in the eye. "Lily, I promise you, as long as I am here, you will never have to worry about a meal or a bed again. And it's not because of the wallet. It's because you and your mommy are part of my family now. And we don't leave family behind." He took a cracker from the stash and ate it. Though, I have to say, your mommy's kitchen makes much better snacks than these hidden crackers. Lily giggled, the first real carefree laugh Ethan had ever heard from her. It was in that moment he knew he didn't just want to date Sarah. He wanted to be the man who ensured Lily never felt afraid again. As the New Year's Eve gala approached, the pressure mounted. This wasn't just a party. It was Sarah's formal introduction to the old money of the Midwest. Evelyn insisted on a full protocol briefing. "You must understand, Sarah," Evelyn said, walking her through the ballroom. "These people use manners as weapons. They will ask you about your lineage, your university, and your philanthropic history. They want to find a crack in your armor." "Then I won't wear armor," Sarah said. She chose a dress that was elegant but simple. She refused the heavy diamond tiara Evelyn offered, opting instead for a single pearl necklace that had belonged to her own mother, the only thing she had managed to keep in a safe deposit box during her months of homelessness. The day of the gala, Sarah visited the cemetery. She stood at her late husband's grave, the snow falling softly on the granite. "I found someone, Mark," she whispered. "He's not like us, but he has a good heart. He loves Lily. I think you'd like him. He knows I'm not replacing you. I'm just continuing the story we started." She left a small sprig of holly on the headstone. She felt a sense of peace. She wasn't running away from her past. She was carrying it with her into a new chapter. At the gala, Vanessa made her move. She cornered Sarah near the buffet, surrounded by a group of high society influencers. "Tell us, Sarah," Vanessa said, her voice loud enough to draw a crowd. "What's your secret for finding billionaire wallets? Is there a specific park you recommend for aspiring gold diggers?" The room went silent. Ethan started to move toward them, but Evelyn caught his arm, whispering, "Let her handle it. She needs this." Sarah took a sip of her sparkling water and looked Vanessa directly in the eyes. She didn't look angry. She looked pitying. "Vanessa, I found a wallet because I was sitting on a bench with no home to go to. It wasn't a strategy. It was a tragedy. I returned it because even when I had nothing, I still had my integrity. You have everything: money, status, and power. Yet you seem to be lacking the one thing I had in abundance: a sense of worth that doesn't depend on a bank account." Sarah stepped closer, her voice dropping to a calm, steady tone. "You've spent all night trying to make me feel small. But after you've slept on a concrete floor in sub-zero temperatures, words from someone like you don't hurt. They just sound like noise." Vanessa opened her mouth to retort, but the surrounding guests, many of whom were tired of Vanessa's arrogance, began to murmur in approval of Sarah's poise. Vanessa, realizing she had lost the room, turned on her heel and vanished into the crowd. After the proposal on the balcony, which we saw in the previous summary, the narrative moves into the quiet new year. While the rest of the world was partying, Ethan and Sarah spent the first hours of the year in the nursery, watching Lily sleep. "I want to do this right," Ethan said. "A wedding that isn't for the press. A wedding for us." "And a wedding that helps others," Sarah added. They decided that instead of a traditional gift registry, they would ask their wealthy guests to donate to a Housing First initiative. Ethan pledged to match every dollar donated. As they sat by the fire, Ethan pulled out a legal document. "I've started the process, Sarah. With your permission, I'd like to legally adopt Lily after we're married. I want her to have my name, my protection, and my inheritance. Not because she needs the money, but because she is my daughter in every way that matters." Sarah couldn't speak. She simply leaned her head on his shoulder. The journey from that frozen bench to this warm fire felt like 1,000 years, yet she knew it was only the beginning.